I am almost ready to print, but I wanted to point something out to you, and that is the hidden and dashed lines are not appearing properly. If I switch back to model space, everything looks correct here. When I go to paper space, it's not quite right. There's a system variable that we need to change in order for this to work right. And that system variable is PSLT scale. That's short for paper space line type scaling. It's currently turned on, which means that paper space determines our scale factor. Let me now enter. I've typed in PSLT scale, and as you can see, the 1 means it's on. I want to change that value to 0 and turn it off. The reason I want to turn it off is because I want to let model space dictate how my lines will appear. So typing 0 and enter doesn't immediately change things. What you have to do after completing that is go to View and select Regen All. We talked about Regen, which recalculates the information on the screen, but Regen only works for the current space in which you're in, so it would only work in model space or paper space. When I select Regen All, it will regenerate both the information in model space and in paper space. When I click that, now you can see that the lines appear properly, and that's what I want. The other thing I want to point out is to turn on this viewport layer. Sometimes what can happen is if you're inside the floating model space, you can accidentally zoom in. That has happened, and it could cause problems for you. What you can do is, if this happens, immediately undo, like I did just now, or let me go back to paper space here and open up the Properties window and select the viewport. I'm going to scroll down, and as you can see, the standard scale right now is 1/2 inch equals a foot. Above that, it indicates display locked, and that determines whether the viewport is in locked state or not. Right now it is not, but I'm going to choose yes, and then I'm going to close this. Now, since the viewport is locked, if I am now in floating model space and I select zoom window, it immediately pushes me out to paper space, allows me to zoom in, and then takes me back to my floating model space viewport. In other words, it protects that scale and keeps it on at all times. Now if I do a zoom extents, it's not going to zoom extents the information within the viewport, but rather zoom extents what we have in paper space. So that's a very nice feature, and if you needed to change the scale, you would have to come back to Properties, select it, and modify the display locked and change it from yes to no. One other thing I'd like to point out, and that is that I could have multiple viewports open, not just this one. I can create another one. Again, I could go to View, or I can simply type MV as a keyboard shortcut and create a window here, a viewport. Double click inside, change the scale. This time, let's say 1 inch equals a foot, and I could pan, and maybe I want a close-up of the kitchen stove and the kitchen sink. Right click and exit, go back to paper space and resize that window properly. Now of course if we had a bigger sheet this would work very well, but we only have one right now. So let me erase this one. Another thing I could do is, instead of calling this layout 1, I can right click on it and rename it, and I can call it, say, VTC, and OK that. I could put another layout in other words, I can bring in another border, maybe a bigger size sheet, and do another view of this plan, whatever I choose to. If I don't need it, I could leave it, or I could also delete it. Select yes. And now this is our completed drawing, and we should be ready to print.